Welcome to the PI show. My name's Harry Nowicki. I'm a PI lawyer, personal injury lawyer. I've got a colleague, Tony Carbone, who's...
Welcome, Harry. Welcome, viewers.
...who's a regular, and we've got an up-and-coming public liability lawyer, Alice O'Kane. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you.
It's very exciting for you to be here, I think, and we're going to talk at length about public liability.
That's correct, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Tony, before we get to that, there's a what's in the news.
Yeah, Harry, just in recent times there's been concerns about the doubling in the numbers of Legionnaires-related conditions in Victoria. The Chief Medical Officer's basically said that people should check the cooling towers in their premises and things like that, because in the last, say, 12 months there's been an alarming increase in the number of people getting Legionnaire's disease. There's been 1 or 2 deaths, and also what they've done is they've had problems in Doncaster and also regional areas and things like that. So,
but do people have a claim if they're injured or, unfortunately, if someone dies? Is there a claim that's viable?
If the person survives, they obviously have a claim, because the argument will be that they've failed to maintain the towers. They haven't done proper inspections and things like that. So, they do have a claim. And if someone dies, there's dependency issues. If there's dependents under the Wrongs Act, which we're going to get onto shortly, the family might have a claim for loss of dependency. And also, if they suffer a stress-related condition, post-traumatic stress, nervous shock, and they satisfy the requirements of the Wrongs Act, again, more than 10% long-term, then they'll probably have a claim again. So there's a range of possible claims.
I think there's been one claim, to my knowledge, many years ago. I think there was 10 defendants named.
Yeah, that's right. And I also had the one where the fellow found out, coincidentally, one of the nurses said to him, "Oh, your father died of Legionnaire's disease," as opposed to the flu or something similar to that. And he was so alarmed at the fact that he was misled that he lost something like 40 kilos, 30 to 40 kilos. We sued for post-traumatic stress and anxiety and depression.
Settled
and we
matter.
settled out of court, yeah. So they're the sorts of claims.
But moving on, we're just going to tonight discuss what's called the Wrongs Act, which is an act of Parliament in Victoria. It's first legislated in 1958.
Correct.
However, it's been amended.
Several times, in fact.
And what's the most important amendment, Alice?
Harry, the most important amendment came in 2003, which is an amendment adding Section 14B to the Wrongs Act. This section covers public liability of occupiers, essentially.
And there was also a section on what's called obvious risk, and people should, in effect, keep an eye out for their own safety.
That's correct. There's been a shift in the law which has suggested that people are individually more responsible for their own safety, and that the law expects people to look out for themselves, even if they're on a premises that might contain dangers.
So we'll come to 1 or 2 cases about that, but what happened was in 2003 there was so-called crisis in the insurance industry.
Yes.
HIH, an insurer, went bankrupt.
That's correct.
And I think one of the medical defence funds also went bankrupt. And the government instituted inquiry under Justice Ip.
That's correct.
And he made recommendations, and that led to the changes to the Wrongs Act. Now, before the Wrongs Act changed, Tony, I believe there were 1,500 cases in the county court.
There was a lot of cases.
In any one year. And then after the Wrongs Act changed, the first year there was 60 cases.
Oh, the drop was made.
To my knowledge, that went in the county court. So there's a dramatic difference in the number of cases that went to court. And one of the other changes really was that you have to have what's called a 5% impairment to actually claim for pain and suffering.
That's correct, Harry.
So
that's for physical injuries, and then for psychiatric injuries, you've got to have 10%.
Yeah, you've got to have 10%, but 5%. A lot of people who are injured in a public place have injuries. You've probably seen these where they might have broken bones, all sorts of damage, but they heal.
That's correct, Harry.
And they don't then have what's called a 5% long-term impairment.
That's right, Harry. When someone sustains an injury like a broken bone, it does need to be a permanent injury. So if the bone heals and that there is no
A good recovery.
underlying consequences, you can't sue unless you've got an injury that is continuing, even though you've been through as much surgery as you have.
But you can't sue for pain and suffering only. If you've lost money, if you've had out-of-pocket expenses, you can sue.
That's correct.
But you can't get any compensation. You can't get $1 for pain and suffering.
That's right, unless you have a permanent injury.
Alice, you talk about broken bones. What about the client or individual that sustains a broken leg and then starts having digestive problems because of medication and things like that? That forms part of your injuries, doesn't it?
That's correct, Tony. Those sort of things are called consequences, or what we call consequences in the law, and they can be taken into account and they can be added to your pain and suffering damages.
That's right. And
So the Wrongs Act governs what's called occupiers, people who own property in Victoria, and then if you fall or trip or slip in someone's property, then you can sue them as the occupier.
That's correct.
And what duties does the occupier have, just generally? What are they supposed to do?
Generally, Harry, the occupier has a duty to maintain their premises in a safe manner and to make sure they don't do things or forget to do things that might cause injury to people on the premises. So it's a very high standard of care that occupiers need to maintain.
All right, well, we've got the case of...
well, Harry, just the other thing, the Wrongs Act you're referring to, it's maybe shut up to the viewers, just basically consolidates the law as we knew it in the past. It codifies it.
Yeah, in 2003, it codified a lot of the common law principles that the courts had evolved over many years.
Yep.
But turning to a particular case, Mrs. Haley lived in Maryborough
That's correct.
and was walking along the footpath outside the Flagstaff Hotel.
That's correct.
What happened?
It had been a rainy day, Harry, and Mrs. Haley was walking along with her husband, and as they came to the front of the Flagstaff Hotel, the hotel had undergone renovations and there was a temporary footpath set up in front of the hotel. And some mesh had fallen down from part of the temporary construction, and it had covered the footpath, and it covered the majority of the footpath. Mrs. Haley came, she walked along, and she was forced to walk over the mesh because it covered so much of the footpath, and unfortunately she tripped and fell, and she sustained some injuries.
Sustained injuries. And she sued 4 defendants.
That's correct, Harry. She sued the council and she sued the hotel, the construction company, I believe, and a contractor.
And Alice, we're going to have to come back to this after the sponsors break. So viewers, keep watching. Don't go away, and we'll be back shortly.